basic economic foundation.
OK, I'll give you that. You got number one, but not number two. Number two is higher living standards for working families.
Right.
What's pledge number three on the card?
Pledge number three, I don't put them in order, but the NHS, we have to get right. We have to get it right.
What's pledge number five?
Better future for the young people.
Correct. You've memorised the pledge card, have you? Labour also unveiled a new celebrity backer, the actor who played the bad dad in the TV drama Broadchurch.
I thought now was the time to stop just sitting back in my front room and doing my wife's head in by shouting out at the telly every time I watch Question Time.
Or the Sunday Politics.
Or the Sunday Politics, which I do watch. And actually just be involved, you know, we have the courage of your convictions and stand out and speak.
It turned out it wasn't just true believers here, there were some real, actual voters. Have they swayed you this morning?
I've met some really nice people and I'm really impressed with some of their public services.
The more social policies.
Yeah.
I'm
Then you can't beat the Tories on the economy, you know. I just think every time there's been a Labour government, we've ended up with a recession.
And because there's an election on, inevitably it all ended with some gatecrashers. A bunch of Conservatives in Alex Salmon masks, making the point that an inconclusive election result could force Labour to do a deal with the SNP.
Joining me now from Doncaster is the Shadow Energy Secretary, Caroline Flint. Caroline Flint, welcome to the Sunday Politics. I've got your 5 priority pledges on this little card in front of me here. They make no mention of business, so I guess that confirms that business just isn't a priority for Labour.
No, that's not true at all. I mean, part of what we need to do as a country is to make sure that we bear down on the deficit and balance the books, and that's the number one pledge. But also, businesses have been saying we need skills, we need young people ready for the world of work. And number 5 of our pledges deals with bringing down tuition fees to £6,000 a year, but also making sure that young people who don't want to go to university and make the grade can get an apprenticeship when they leave school. But you know as well as I do, Andrew, that we're also going to make sure that small businesses benefit from a block on their business rates that they're paying at the moment. We'll do that by freezing and cutting the corporation tax.
But there is no mention of business on either side of your card, even on the bit about the economy. The word business isn't mentioned. Now, Ed Balls published his 5 priorities, and one of his priorities is backing Britain's businesses to grow, cut business rates, more competition, new British investment bank. If they're one of Ed Balls' priorities, why are they not why is it not one of Ed Miliband's priorities?
But they are part of our priorities, and all of those will be laid out in the manifesto. You mentioned the Green Investment
But I'm talking
Bank.
the 5 in your card. These are your real priorities, and business isn't mentioned.
Look, our priorities are about a strong economic foundation. It's a bit about dealing with the cost of living, so we actually don't just have a race to the bottom for a low-wage, low-skill economy. It's about our health service and NHS, and it's also about making sure we have firm controls on immigration. And that's why we're saying that we cannot have a situation where people come in and claim before they've put something into the system through their taxation. But also, we want to also tackle some of those situations I know that exist, where some employers sadly exploit migrant workers, and other businesses are trying to do the right thing, who don't use agencies, who try to make sure that they keep within the law, are undercut day by day. And skills, as I said, is the final one.
All right.
There are lots of policies, and I can remember hang on, Andrew, I can remember going back to 97 and other elections that I've been involved in, and you wouldn't expect to have every single policy on there. But I think what this represents, this pledge card, is an offer which is about strong economic foundations and understanding that we can only be successful.
You said that. We haven't got that much time,
too.
Ms Flint, so I'm just anxious that we move on and that we don't repeat things.
Fair
Ed
enough.
Balls this week said that further Tory cuts would be so deep they'd even have to abolish the Foreign Office. Yesterday, Ed Miliband said the Tories would strip public services back to 1930s levels when there was no NHS. He was also going to say when kids left school at 14, but he left that bit out. You must be getting desperate to resort to this kind of absurd scaremongering.
I think it's only right to paint the picture of what the offer from the Tories really means. They've had 5 years in which they told all of us that they would eliminate the deficit, that actually, you know, everyone would share the burden of cuts. And what we've seen is actually ordinary working people, with the tax and benefit changes that have been made by this government, are £1,000 worse off. And now the OBR has identified that with their future plans going forward, that they will take public spending as a proportion of GDP down to the levels of the 1930s.
Are you seriously suggesting the Tories are going to abolish the NHS?
What I'm saying is I think they've actually put the NHS at risk already. What we have seen through the choices they have made, Andrew, reorganisation, not attending to the problems of the pressures on A&Es because people aren't getting to see their GPs.
That's fine. Attacking them on the NHS is fine. But hold on. Ed Miliband said yesterday to your conference the Tories would strip public services back to 1930s levels when there was no NHS. Is that what you're suggesting, that there would be no NHS if the Tories win?
I think it's right to have a discussion with the British people about where they are taking public spending and where that takes in terms of where we were in the 30s and where we might be going in the future. I'm not saying, Andrew, I'm not saying there will not be a health service. What I'm saying is we've already seen how they've undermined the health service over the last 5 years, and if we go down the route of the Tory cuts, it would be in further danger going forward.
Well, you keep on comparing... Well, Ed Miliband was implying there wouldn't be a health service under the Tories. You keep on saying go back to the spending levels of the early 1930s. What was public spending in the early 1930s?
We're talking about something around 35%.
No, but what was it in terms of money? How much was spent?
Well, it's a lot less than it was being
spent.
Well,
I'll tell you,
today,
it was
Andrew,
in the 1932, it was £1.4 billion. In today's money, that's £83 billion. That's the equivalent in today's money. Today, under this Conservative-led coalition government, the Tories are spending £731 billion, not £83 billion, £731 billion. So for you to say they'd go back to the level of the 1930s is implying they'd cut public spending by £650 billion. You know that's a nonsense.
But Andrew, we also know that the health service we need today and also education that we need today, the challenges we face, but also what we need to keep people healthy is way different from what it was in the 1930s. And what we have to do is make sure, going forward, we have a health service that is supported, not only in terms of emergency care, but also care in the community as well. We have to deal with a different set of demographics that face us today. Children, for example, in the 1930s, did leave school earlier. That doesn't happen today, but we expect more in terms of qualifications for our children because the sort of jobs that exist today and will exist in the future will rely on better qualifications and better standards of education for our children. And that's the context we're talking about. What people have seen and witnessed, that those services have come under pressure from this government that hasn't helped either people's health or children's education.
Let me come on to energy prices, a particular concern of yours. You used to talk about a freeze, that became a cap, now it's a cut. 2 years ago you said Ofgem had, quote, let energy companies get away with ripping off hard-pressed families and pensioners. Now you want to give Ofgem more power. Do you have any idea what you're doing?
We've been very clear, Andrew, from day one on this. We've always said, from the day that Ed Miliband made his speech in 2013, that we would have a freeze on prices for 20 months to stop them rising, but that would not stop them being cut, or for that matter, people switching to other providers. But we also said, I think around 2 years ago, that we would give the regulator the power that if wholesale costs fell, and it wasn't passed on fairly to their customers, then we give the regulator the power to make sure that that happens. Now, we've had that as a policy for at least 2 years, and, well, hang on, we are going to make sure that we have a... No, Andrew, no, sorry, you're twisting that around. When we come into government, we will have a regulator. There will need to be regulation going forward as we take our reforms through. But we will have a new regulator in the medium term, long term, because we want to make sure we've got better powers through our reform package. But please let me answer the question about this new power for the regulator that we have had on our stocks for 2 years. We have seen wholesale costs fall, and we haven't seen a fair sharing of that with customers. And we're not just saying that, Ofgem has said it as well. So we will make sure that Ofgem will have the power in our first bill after the election to look at this area and cut prices in time for Christmas, because these companies don't do it, and this government has had 2 opportunities in the last year to support that measure in Parliament. They blocked it twice. We're not going to let that happen under a Labour government.
But you've acknowledged that you can't force Ofgem to cut prices. And even if you give it these new powers,
I haven't acknowledged that.
Oh, you're going to force Ofgem to cut price? I just want to ask you, if Ofgem turns out to be as useless as you used to think it was, what will you do then?
Look, let me explain, OK? Every energy company in the UK has to have a licence to operate, and within that licence there are conditions. It is already the case that Ofgem has a duty, if you like, to look at these prices and see that they're cost reflective, and I have to say there's continuing evidence to show that that isn't necessarily the case. What we will be able to do is be able to amend the licence to give the power to Ofgem that if the companies do not pass on wholesale cost falls in a fair way to their customers, just like they raise our bills when wholesale costs go up, then as a backstop power, the regulator will have the power to make sure that that is passed on to customers. That has been our policy for 2 years. It will be in our first energy bill under a Labour government, because we want to make sure that we tackle this issue we've got at the moment, where gas and electricity bills have fallen by a conservative average of around 20%, but the only pass on to customers on gas bills only has been between 1% and 5%.
Right.
So I can't be any clearer than that, I think.
Okay.
It's
no,
very
I'm just
clear.
not quite clear
what
what you do if Ofgem doesn't cut the prices.
But
let me move on. You've explained your policy.
That's a matter for Ofgem.
No, I understand that, but I'm asking what would you do? But anyway, let me move on, because we are short of time. I want to move on to the more general position. 2 years ago, Labour had a 9-point lead in the poll of polls. A year ago, that was down to 5 points. That's been whittled down over the past 12 months, and you're now basically nip and tuck with the Tories. The Tories may even be 1 point ahead. Is Labour now coming from behind in this election?
Look, I think it is really positive that where we were in 2010 in terms of having lost that election and lost it badly to where we are today. We have been saying consistently that, look, this election is going to be hard fought, and we are not complacent about that at all. But the truth is, we are now we are in touching distance of winning this election, and we're going to fight for every vote. And I think it's Cameron who should be worried, because despite 5 years of being in control, he hasn't been able to demonstrate that he is able to win the trust of the British people. Now,
we know, just finally, you pledged to abolish what you call the spare bedroom tax. After last week's photo op, can we take it that you'll also rule out the spare kitchen tax?
Well, do you know, I wondered if this programme was going to go into the realms of through the keyhole. Look, I think people are interested in, what is on offer from the different politicians, and we're very clear about where we stand. We're not against, kitchens, but what we are in favour of making sure that we have an economy that works for working people, because that's the only way that we can succeed as a country. And I'd be very happy to come and have a look at your kitchen, Andrew.
Yeah, you are welcome for a cup of tea at any time, and if it's suitable in the day, even a glass of blue, none. But you didn't have to take the last question quite so seriously. Thank you, Caroline Flint. Now, Liberal Democrats, or what's left of them, have been gathering at the party's spring conference in Liverpool over the weekend. The latest polls suggest the party's engaged in a fight for 4th place with the Greens and set to lose a raft of seats on May the 7th. But senior party figures are more optimistic. They say it'd be a mistake to write off the Lib Dems just yet. Ed Davey is the Energy and Climate Change Secretary. He joins me now from Liverpool. Welcome, Mr. Davey. Energy companies have passed on only a fraction of the fall in wholesale energy prices in cuts in our fuel bills. Why shouldn't Ofgem have the power to force them to cut their prices?
Well, first of all, because we've introduced huge amounts of more competition, people can cut their bills. If the average person switches today, they can save £200 a year. And if you look at the Best Buy tables, the fixed tariff deals have gone down by over £100 in the last year. So I'm afraid Caroline and the Labour Party, again, completely